Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everybody? Geoff Mosher and Adam Caplan for another Inside the Birds presented by our friends at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. It's the exclusive Jersey Shore resort of Inside the Birds. And we can't blame anybody for thinking of Jersey Shore and resorts these days. I mean, it is a hot summer in the city, in the suburbs, Adam. I mean, it's scorching. And you know what? When it gets hot like this in the middle of July, you start to realize Eagles training camp right around the corner. And in fact, next week on Tuesday, the madness begins. Are you excited?
They report. Yeah, I'm starting to make my training camp tour schedule, which is like it's basically like a jigsaw puzzle. It's not easy to do.
Right.
But yeah, so we got a lot of teams reporting this week. And look, understand something when the Eagles report. The first 4 to 5 days is the light acclimation period. But you can tell, though, the one thing you can get out of the early portion, because the practices are pretty light, you can see what the depth charts look like. Whereas we don't take the depth chart seriously in the offseason. I do that first week because you start to get an idea of what things may look like. But yeah, you're right. Training camps are starting to open up. This is the hottest summer I think I could remember. I'm sure people have, the stats on the records, but it's pretty much 90 every day. It's absolutely brutal. I know you're a runner, and I'm a tennis guy, so I play actually earlier today. I played at 6 a.m. Eastern, at 6 a.m. To beat the heat. Yeah, I'm getting up at 4:45. I can't deal with this heat in the afternoon. I just cannot. I don't play in the afternoon anymore. I can't deal with it. It's not fun. Like, now, do you like running in heat? Does it bother you?
First of all, I'm a runner, but I hate running, to be honest with you. I just force
really?
myself to do it. Yeah, I don't get a whole lot of enjoyment out of it. It's just something I have to do for my health and fitness.
Sure. Let me ask you a question, though.
I'd rather play like a 3-hour, pick up basketball game,
play hoops.
softball,
Okay.
but like, what am I going to do? I don't have you can have a tennis partner. I can't just grab 4 guys and
right. But you can't show up to a park but don't you just sometimes, when I was in my 20s and 30s, when I play a lot of hoops, yeah, I might meet a couple of friends there, but yeah, you just basically, you get there and you see who's like, okay, if you're playing full court, okay, 5-on-5, okay, you want to see if you can get in on the next game or however it used to work. But here's the question, though, on jogging. So I know I pretty much know this. You have earbuds in, right? You're listening to music.
I do.
So, but aren't you kind of when I'm a big walker, though I don't run, but when I don't play tennis, I walk a lot. I like have my headphones on. It gives me time to think, just to get away from everything. Isn't it kind of more of escape, or no? For you?
It is. In fact, I listen to music. Sometimes I listen to podcasts, but no matter what, while I'm running, a lot of times my mind starts. Some of the best ideas that we've had I've been able to bring to ITB have been hatched while I was out for a run. So, because
one more,
the only problem is that I'm such a freaking scatterbrain that I think of some great ideas like at the beginning of my run, and then I get home and I'm all sweaty and I get a shower. And by the time I'm like changed and dry, I'm like, oh, what was that idea that I had? I can't write it down at the moment. So
you got your phone, though.
Some of my best ideas have been forgotten, I think.
Right, but don't you have your phone with you?
Yeah, I'm just
stop and
while I'm running. I don't like to stop. I don't like to. I hate when I like my shoes on. I don't like to disrupt my flow.
I got you.
But yeah, I will. So I can't run at 6 a.m. I mean, I should. So like you said, I just can't get up that early, and I got too much stuff that I got to do as soon as I get up. So I usually run. I try to run before noon, but sometime in that 10 to 11 range, 11 a.m. But that's also not to answer your question. There's not a lot of great, pick up basketball games to find in my area at 10 in the morning or 11 in the morning on a Tuesday. Yeah. So I just got to get the running in. Yeah. Plus a run is like, for me, I can do, almost 4 miles in about 35 minutes. So 36 minutes, that's, if I'm going to play basketball, I want a little more time or anything else. This is just the fastest way to get a really good workout in.
Nice.
Yeah.
Just a couple things before we get started here. So I want to shout out to the people who listen to our show. I was Sirius XM Fantasy channel. We had an event at the Garage Bar in Fishtown, and it was really remarkable. There's a charity fantasy football draft called the Scott Fishbowl, which was there, and we also brought our fantasy show there. There were like 150 to 200 people. It was insanity. I was like,
wow.
Easily 20 people came up and said they listened to us.
That's
It said more.
fantastic.
Two guys said you got to get Greg Cosell more. I'm like, how much money do you think we have? Greg's taking it all. No, we're just joking, but it was great to hear that. It was really cool to be there. And then we also want a shout out to our business partner and our legal arm and our marketing guy, Josh Weinfeld, on his nuptials. We were at his wedding in Fishtown also on Saturday. That was great.
Yeah, so funny story on that involving Inside the Birds. We were sitting at the same table, and there was a guy sitting between us. His name was well, it doesn't matter what his name is, but nice man. He was an agent who represented baseball players, mostly minor league guys, a lot of guys who play overseas. And after you left, Adam, he kept asking me more about being a reporter, what it's like being an
Yeah,
Eagles insider.
yeah.
And at some point after we were having a conversation, he goes, "Wait a minute. Are you the Inside the Birds guys?" Because we were talking about you
I
too.
thought he knew that.
I
Thought he
thought
knew
so
that.
too,
Yeah.
but I go, yeah, we're Inside the Birds. And he goes, "Oh man, I didn't realize you guys were." He's like, "I've heard a lot about you guys through Josh, right?"
It's for Josh.
He's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
"Congratulations on your success, man." I was like, "Oh," so I was
I know
sort of
we
shocked
had
because
any.
I
Thank you.
thought he was already asking me about Inside the Birds, but
Well, no,
just thought
the
we were just
craziness.
Eagles reporters, like regular, reporters, and not Inside the Birds.
Right. No, he actually said to me he knew about what we were doing, but I don't. What happened is I asked myself, why are you what? It was weird. Like I sat down immediately, and he's watching his phone. I'm like, why are you watching minor league baseball? I just was curious. I didn't even say hello to the guy.
In the middle of a
Excuse me.
wedding.
Right. I'm like, what are you doing? Because it's funny, I'm so into the Phillies. I was going to go to see their single A team when they were at Wilmington, but they had some guys got hurt, so I wound up not going. But this guy's watching, and then he goes, "Oh, I'm an agent. I have players." So because I know a couple baseball agents with minor league baseball players, they live and die like with every game because it's you want these guys to be brought up to the majors so they can make money. But anyway, that was pretty crazy. So that was it was a good weekend, man. Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was cool.
Yeah, it was fun. I also wanted to say shout out to, I believe his name was Ryan. Could have been Brian, could have been something that
Yeah,
begins with an R. And I was down in Wildwood at a watering hole, and he came up to me. He recognized me, and he said he loved our content. And
awesome.
he said, "Keep doing your thing. It's great. I listen to it all the time." So hopefully, I did not butcher his name, and I got it somewhat
Yeah,
correct. But I wanted to say
close.
I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
yeah.
Yeah, definitely appreciate it. I don't mind when people come up to me in public and say hello and introduce and say they like Inside the Birds. That
Awesome.
never bothers
Yeah,
me. So
love
it
it.
was good.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So I hope everyone, and judging by like 95% of the comments, they did really enjoyed our annual NFC East preview series. We started with Washington, went on to New York, went on to Dallas, went on to Philadelphia, closing it out with the Eagles. We did it with Greg Cosell. It was about as comprehensive as you can get. Tons of great comments. I did find amusement in the one guy after the Dallas show got posted who ripped us for saying too many nice things about the arch. His comment was like, "Well, I can't believe these guys are saying all these nice things about our arch rivals. How horrible! What's wrong with them?" And I don't think maybe he'd missed the Washington and New York previews and thought we were just doing a Dallas
Yeah,
preview podcast and we're saying good things about them. But if he had noticed, it was an entire series, and we objectively do it every year, pointing out good things, bad things, what we expect from each team. Most people get that and really loved it. I think we had a ton of Washington Commanders listeners because
it's
that one
unbelievable.
blew up, but the feedback was great. So we really enjoyed. It's probably one of my favorite series that we do all year. And I know that the fans really liked it. The listeners liked it.
So the Washington fans said, a couple of them said this, and they were pretty hardcore because I've seen their comments on the player. They really know the roster. They're
Mhm.
saying these are the most comprehensive breakdowns, better than the beat reporters do for the Commanders. I was like, wow, thank you. That's
Yeah.
pretty. It's why we get Greg. Look, it's why we bring him back. Obviously, he's great, and nobody does it better than him. He's the smartest guy. Doesn't work for an NFL team. And it's pretty remarkable. And we always learn something we didn't know about some of these players. So Cam Curl was this Greg's guy 4 years ago.
Yep.
If you recall, we signed with the Rams. We learned a lot about these players and kind of what to expect. Because look, he can only go by what he saw from the college players, right? What he's seen for these coaches. He's great because he knows the coaches' systems, how they call plays. It's great how he broke down Dan Quinn's defense. Um, and look, he just broke it down on what he thinks it's going to look like. And as we move forward here, it's interesting because you and I were worried that we were all kind of negative about the Eagles, and I think people kind of get it with Greg, where there's a little bit of hate with him like 2 or 3 years ago because people thought he was too hard on the Eagles.
Mm-hmm.
they get it when Greg says this is the Eagles' issue with here, here, and here. They don't get mad. They're like, okay, we got to deal with this. Let's see how he does. See how they coach it and all that. They don't get mad at Greg anymore. It's actually kind of fascinating.
Yeah, I do find that the feedback has trended toward rational much more lately.
Which
Then
is saying
you
something
guys
in
are
social media.
Negadelphians or yeah. No, I mean, like, I think that's what people appreciate,
Yeah.
really good, honest, objective breakdown. Most people
Right.
do, and that's what we bring. And we're going to do that actually today in this podcast. We're going to start a two-part series here. We've done this before as well. This is where we examine the coaching philosophies of the Eagles, and it becomes really pertinent this year because they have new offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator, and both of them are from outside the building. So they both bring a lot of differences to their philosophies than the prior regimes. So this podcast, we will discuss the offensive coaching staff and specifically target some of the newcomers and what they bring to the table, what their histories are, what their influences are, and how we understand that will be impactful to the team this year and going forward. And then, of course, on Thursday, we will do one on defense. And then the week after that, training camp will start. So we'll have our preview shows and
Wow.
we'll get right into the thick of things. Looking forward to that. In fact, we'll be actually turning the page to season 7 of Inside the Birds. So I always, the first one where I put the episode number at them and it says season episode number, I always enjoy turning that page to the next season, and we'll be doing that next week.
Do we know how many shows we've done? I'm just curious. We'll look it up.
Yes, we
You
do.
know?
We have done, this will be this is show number
Oh my
966, I think. So
wow, we're almost at
we're
1,000.
closing in on 1,000, man. Isn't that
Holy
pretty crazy?
holy. Wow. Yeah,
That
we
includes like other stuff that's appeared on our
of course.
platform, like
Right.
Q&A or
Sure.
Intel, but
Okay.
hey, that's
Yeah.
all
Yeah. It
Inside the
counts.
Birds podcast.
That's
So
right. That's our family. Yeah. So that's wonderful, man. It just started as a concept. Who the hell knew everything we've been through with this thing, you never know what's going to happen year to year with this thing. And I cannot wait till we make some announcements we got coming on. We always try to throw something different every year, bring on people that are different and concepts that are different. So we couldn't do without you with your support. We wouldn't be here without the support. So we're really appreciative.
absolutely. All right, we'll talk about some more things to expect from Inside the Birds coming up in a little bit. Want to get into this offensive coaching staff. The two biggest additions are pretty obvious. It's the offensive coordinator and the quarterbacks coach, Kellen Moore and Doug Nussmeier. And in the process of talking about who they are, what they believe, what their philosophies are, we're going to wind up mentioning another name. We could just do ahead now as far as an influence, because both of these guys, both separately and I think once together, have worked under the influence or the tutelage or or just alongside Scott Linehan, who has been a
Yes.
very successful offensive coordinator. He was a head coach for a couple of years when the Rams were in St. Louis. But for the most part, Scott Linehan is known as a guy who knows how to score points, who likes to attack, and who is a spread offense guy. I believe they all have their roots in Idaho, right? Scott Linehan was once at Idaho. Doug Nussmeier played quarterback at Idaho. And we know that uh, Kellen Moore played at Boise State, which is in Idaho.
Yeah.
And if you've ever watched any Idaho
Yeah.
games, which I have, I know Andrew DeCecco has. If you ever watched Boise State back when Kellen Moore, you know they love to throw the freaking ball around every single time they can. Idaho's got that dome, right? That they play in, and they chuck the ball all around as well. That whole conference likes to throw the ball.
Well, what I remember about Kellen Moore is you saw this left-handed, sort of frail left-handed quarterback who was a baller, man. I was like, I don't know how he's getting this done,
Mm-hmm.
but they had that crazy colored field with the blue field.
Yep.
Boy, it radiates off the turf on television. But he was a pretty accomplished quarterback at Boise State, Senior Bowl participant, undrafted guy because he just didn't have a very good arm for a smaller guy. And the word I talked to Cowboys coaches who work with Kellen as a player, then on the staff, first couple years with Kellen with Dallas. They kind of knew, though he was 31 when he was calling plays after he retired, which is crazy. And that's super young. They kind of knew he could do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's rare to say that as someone who just retired to go in and to call plays immediately. That's like unheard of. But he kind of did, and I give him credit. This is his 6th season calling plays, and he's only 36 years old. He just turned 36 earlier this month. Couple of interesting nuggets here, and I don't know how this. We'll see how this works with Moore and Nick Sirianni. We everybody should know, if they don't know, that Moore interviewed for the Eagles head coaching job at 21 that Sirianni got, and look, it was Nick's call in the end to hire Kellen Moore. We know that wasn't their first choice. There were other guys they were looking at, but particularly one in Washington didn't work out. And then Kellen's guy that everybody was very high on with the Eagles, every personnel staff, obviously the head coach Sirianni was a fan of Kellen's, and I'm just interested to see the relationship because it's Kellen's run now. He's calling the plays. There's not going to be interference. There'll be input, but it's not going to be like last year or years before. It's not Nick's scheme. He's got to get familiar with it, and Kellen's going to call the plays. So I'm just interested to see what this relationship's going to look like, and we're certainly going to keep an eye on that.
Yeah. By the way, Doug Nussmeier, also a left-handed quarterback, if I'm not mistaken. So, the small fraternity of left-handed quarterbacks, the Eagles are certainly cornering the market on.
That's interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Doug was. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's examine this, right? Because Kellen Moore enters his 6th season as an offensive coordinator. He had 4 with Dallas, 1 with the Chargers. The expectation here, Adam, is that he is going to bring his spread philosophies, his attack philosophies. It's going to look different theoretically. They'll marry, as Nick Sirianni says, some of these successful things they did the old way. But this should look more like a movement spread offense than, say, a traditional West Coast offense. And one thing Greg Cosell told us that I think that we should all look for is that part of being stale and the route concepts was that the Eagles were far too often in the same 2-by-2 formations, right? And far too stale with it, where they weren't even mixing up who the 2 on the left and who the 2 on the right were. And then, of course, there was very little, if any, pre-snap motion. We expect that there will be more of that. I have to also think that from an expectation standpoint, with this new offensive concept, that the Eagles really should be a top. To me, their floor as an offense should be no lower than 5. I'm not sure if there are 4 teams with better set of offensive weapons than the Eagles. Now, you might say the Chiefs don't have as good offensive weapons, but they have Patrick Mahomes, right?
Yeah.
So you might say they might be ahead of them. But, outside of the 49ers, Chiefs, right? I'm trying to think of another team that I think has the Dolphins, because
Packers. They're super deep, but they're not elite like
But
Devontae.
I'm talking about talent. I'm talking about talent,
sure,
right?
sure.
Yeah.
High-end talent,
I
yes.
think Miami would be a team that you would say has a lot of high-end
Hill
talent.
and Waddle. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So don't you agree that the floor should be 5, the ceiling could be 1? They very well could be the number 1 offense. They should expect to be a top offense in the NFL with what they have.
Yep. So I'm going to hit on what you just said. So when Kellen Moore was the Cowboys quarterbacks coach in 2018, then he became the OC, second year in coaching. One of the coaches on defense told me that he kind of knew from talking to Kellen that there was something there, like he sees it differently. He said, this coach said, you kind of know when you're around certain coaches, they see the game differently because you're trying to get to know what his thought process is when he becomes a coordinator, how he sees offensive, because they see trends. He's really forward thinking. Like just the way that he thinks is different than maybe some other coaches this guy had talked to. This guy's from the defensive side, but he knows a lot of offensive coaches. And because it's a little bit harder to deal with coordinators when they get the job first. When they're position coaches, it's a little bit easier to get to know them because they have more time on their hands. Where the coordinator, you're game planning and you're doing all this and that and the other. This coach said, who was on the staff in 2018, said that he said he's young, but he said, oh boy, this guy could be really interesting. And they didn't know at that time that that Jerry Jones was so high on him. He basically made the call that he would call the plays when Mike McCarthy came in. McCarthy wouldn't call the plays. He made the call on it. Mike would not be able to. Mike made the call in 22 because their offense kind of faded late in 22. There's a criticism of Kellen of that defenses were getting a little bit more physical because when you run a spread, to prevent everyone from getting open, you press more, and things are slowing down a little bit. And that was the one valid criticism I got from somebody who broke down Kellen's offense for us. We'll get more into him.
That it was 2 spread at times.
Oh no, it's not 2 spread, but okay, they started getting physical with your receivers and pass target group. How are you reacting off of that?
Right.
How could you get them to be better? And it's kind of hard to do that in season. And Kellen, unfortunately, he didn't come back. McCarthy got what he wanted. And McCarthy, he doesn't run Kellen's. McCarthy's old school West Coast offense and Kellen's offense are
Right.
completely different.
Right.
Completely different. And Mike didn't want to run it. And Mike was very honest about it. He goes, "I want to run my West Coast offense." It's when you're a CEO head coach like McCarthy was,
Mm-hmm.
when it's not your offense, it's kind of hard. And okay, this is why I brought it up. Now, Sirianni and more, this is why I brought it up. I'm curious to see what Nick does here because he's not calling the plays. It's not his scheme. I know he's been a CEO and coach, but he was heavily involved in game planning. Well, how many guys are you going to have in the year of the quarterback? You don't want what happened with Carson Wentz when it was Nick Scangarello, Press Taylor, Doug Peterson. Marty came actually with in 2020 with Jalen, but there were too many. The word we got with Wentz late in his career, part of the problems was there were too many people, too many cooks in the kitchen. You
Mm.
don't want that here. This is why I brought it up. You don't want that with Jalen because this new scheme. He doesn't need five guys in his ear.
That's a great point. That is a great point. I also wonder, and this is, you can talk to a million people, but you won't know because and now he takes on, as we mentioned, a new set of weapons, right? This offense was at its best when it was RPO centric. Jalen Hurts is excellent at the RPO. His ability to run the read option off of it if he wanted to is great. His quick decision to be able to throw it over the middle after pulling it, was always very good. And 2 years ago, they went to the Super Bowl because the RPO was such a successful part. Now, they ran a lot of RPOs last year. I think they were second to Baltimore in the number of RPOs for last season. The Chargers were pretty high too. I think they were like fifth or sixth when I saw the ranking. But I don't know that in Dallas, I recall them being as RPO centric when he was the coordinator there. Again, you change based on what you have to work with. I wonder if he will want to run as many RPOs as the Eagles have had in the past, or if he would rather be a little bit more spread, pre-snap movement, diversified, and not an RPO, which is kind of a one read type of style offense.
Yeah, well, that was the thing because once the defenses took away Jalen's running lane, particularly outside, the Niners did it, other teams did it. It became a problem for Brian Johnson. They just could not figure out what to do. And you were talking about the 2x2s. We've heard that from other people. Very static offense last season. Didn't really react well when defenses stopped it. Obviously, they couldn't stop it in 22 when Hurts was phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
And I know Hurts regressed last season. It's a fact. This is a tape show, but it wasn't just him. The scheme was too dry. It needed to change. And you heard what Nick said after the season, that first press conference when they need to recharge the offense and all the terms that he used. That's coming here with Kellen Moore. I'm fascinated to see what happens here. And a couple things we're going to give you. So a coach very close to Kellen told me that if he has enough receivers that he trusts, he predicted there'd be top 3 and 10 personnel, which is 4 receivers, 1 back, no tight end.
Mm.
That's how much he wants to go spread. But you can't do it if you don't have the personnel. So what happened last year with the Chargers? He loses Mike Williams in week 3. Ironically, it was probably Justin Herbert's best game. He was unbelievable in that game in Minnesota. And then Mike Williams got lost in the third quarter due to a torn ACL. So obviously he didn't return. Quentin Johnson had to be a starter on the outside. He wasn't ready. He clearly wasn't ready.
Right.
Josh Palmer, who we really like. I know Cosell loves Josh Palmer. He's not a speed guy. They lost their 9-route runner. When you don't have a 9-route runner, you're going to be compressed. So the average per pass attempt went way down because they had nobody who could run downfield. Quentin Johnson was so raw. And Keenan Allen, despite having a phenomenal season, that's not his game. And we'll get into him in a second.
Mm-hmm.
So the offense got compressed. They played more 12 personnel than they wanted to. That's why their tight end numbers were bigger than they expected. Donald Parham was their Y. Everett was their move tight end.
Mm-hmm.
He was now moved on to another team. He's now in Chicago. But you go with the personnel you had, and their offense got destroyed. They just did. Josh Palmer wound up having a pretty bad knee injury, came back. And then Keenan Allen had the heel injury, and then a hamstring injury rather, and then Austin Eckler had an ankle injury. So they ran out of players. In fact, they were hoping. One guy told me that Jalen Guyton would return from his ACL injury, but he didn't till late. And they ran out of players, and it was a disaster.
Mm. Yeah. obviously staying healthy will be big. When you look at what player you think might be impacted the most positively because of the presence of Kellen Moore and this offense he's going to bring, I think, AJ Brown is just going to be, he's the X receiver. He's a perfect X receiver. He's going to go out there and give you X receiver. To me, it's either Devontae Smith and how he chooses to use Devontae. Does he choose to use him like a move Z, like
He
he did
is a
with
Z.
Keenan Allen? Right. I
Yeah.
mean, he is
Yeah.
already, but does he move him around even more?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it someone like Dallas Goedert, as you mentioned, who will really be the best tight end he's probably coached as a coordinator in the league? I mean, he had Ferguson for a year, but obviously Dallas Goedert's better than that.
Yeah.
Not that Ferguson's bad. He could wind up being that good. But the point is, at this stage of his career, Dallas Goedert's going to be the best tight end that Kellen Moore has had to use.
Oh, by the way, so you mentioned Keenan Allen. So Keenan Allen talked about this. I haven't found the quote, but I know he said it because I remember hearing him actually say it on audio. So Keenan Allen said he'd never to your point on Devontae Smith. Keenan Allen's always been their Y slot receiver. A
Mm-hmm.
little bit of movement, but mostly inside, not pretty static. They started moving him around as a Z, and he said he loved it. Well, that game where Mike Williams got hurt, I'm serious. I think Justin Herbert would have put up 500 yards. This is what Kellen wanted the offense to look like.
Mm-hmm.
So Keenan Allen, 20 targets, 18 catches, 215. Mike Williams got hurt in the third quarter, 7 for 121, and he got hurt on a 9 route. And he did score also, by the way. Everett was lined up in the slot. Josh Palmer also, he replaced him. Josh Palmer's a really good player, by the way. Who this is it's third or fourth year. And then and by the funny thing is Eckler didn't even play in that game. And they had this thing going on. It's such a shame. I would have loved to see what that offense would have looked like. So why are we bringing this up? As you said, with the talent the Eagles have now, and they have to their third receiver right now is Paris Campbell. If Campbell could actually play 14 or 15 games, he could have a career year because the third receiver in Kellen Moore's offense is going to get the football. And by the way, people might forget about how Michael Gallup hasn't been a factor in years, but at Kellen's first year as a coordinator, Michael Gallup was phenomenal. In fact, I will give you the numbers. In 2019, Kellen's first year as the coordinator, Amari Cooper had a great season, 79 for 1189. But Michael Gallup, and I know Cosell loved him, and he was never the same after his ACL injury the next year. Gallup, 66 for 1107, 17 yards per catch. To have Michael Gallup as over 1,100 yards, and they were super aggressive. This is Kellen was feeling it and spreading it out, and it was really working. So on your point, yes, Devontae should do great. Brown should do great. Goddard could play. Now, Goddard, because he's a really good athlete and he's long, they can move him around. I expect that to happen. And Gerald Everett was pretty athletic. So they're a little different because Goddard's a much better blocker, but they both can move. I'm interested. Maybe Goddard lines up a little bit in the slot because look, you can do that with him because he's a pretty good athlete.
Yeah, and the name I couldn't remember was Dalton Schultz. He was the one that seemed to really come into his own a couple of years ago in that Kellen Moore offense where he started to become a receiving threat. He signed that 1 year with Houston, but I think he had 808 yards in 2021 for a tight end to get 78 and 808. That is Dallas Goedert numbers. I mean, that's Dallas Goedert right there.
You know what's funny about that season? So I was joking with someone in scouting. I was like, where did this come from? Because this guy said to me, we all saw him as a wide tight end who couldn't move very well. But now I'm not taking anything from Dalton Schultz, but I don't know if that season when he had 104 targets and a career high 78 catches for 808, he was wide ass open all the time. Like because they were worried about whether it's Gallup, obviously Lamb, CeeDee Lamb, or whoever else was there.
Well, Cooper was still there at that point, right? 2021.
I'd have to look, but Dalton Schultz got open, and Dalton Schultz became a player. It's definitely I would have to say this. It's
no Cooper. You're right. He wasn't there yet. I mean, he was already gone to Cleveland. So you're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was Gallup. I can't even remember now who the other outsiders.
Gallup wasn't the same. It was after the ACL, and Brandon Cooks came later, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. But your point is he got 2,000-yard guy in 2019. You had Cooper and Gallup. Now Gallup was the X receiver. Cooper was the move Z in that offense, and both of them really flourished So you would expect that that should continue, and that, if you're a Devontae Smith devotee, which you and I are, and a lot of people are, I would anticipate pretty big year from Devontae Smith. I just have a feeling that I think it's not that I think AJ Brown's hit his peak, but it's really hard to have three straight 1,400-yard years, or even if he does, it's hard to get to 1,500. So, especially with an offense that has so many other mouths to feed, and now you have Saquon Barkley. But Devontae Smith is a guy I think that can continue to really build on the strong foundation that he already established in Nick Sirianni's offense. And I think Kellen Moore and Doug Nussmeier's work together will bring him probably a little bit some more targets, and maybe even more some explosion to his game. I mean, this is the guy who can attack all three levels of the field. And if you get
Yeah.
him in open space, if they get the screen game back, the wide receiver
God
screen
forbid.
game, I know, right? You get more 3-by-1s, or if you start
Yeah.
putting bunch. So this is the big thing I'm looking for. Can they get some trips? Can they get some bunch formations? That's stuff that you haven't seen Nick
He does
Sirianni.
that, by the way, and the Cowboy fans go out of their minds because Kellen would do it in like side the 20.
Yeah.
And they want more, they don't want all this stuff, all this eye candy, and because what will happen is they'll screw a play up, and the fans go out of their mind on social media. What is with this guy? It's actually kind of comical. There's like this really small pocket of fans that hated Kellen Moore. It's like this with every fan base. They find a guy that just there might be like 500 fans that can't stand the way he calls plays. Like it'd be great 90% of the time. It's the times that it doesn't work because they have access to the results. Like, oh, see, I told you, he's trying to be fancy. They don't like it. But let me ask you this: you mentioned this could be maybe a career year with Devontae Smith. Could it be better than 2022? 95 or 11, 96, and 7 touchdowns on 136 targets.
Yeah, you know what? I think with this offensive construct that we're expecting at him, I could see him having more yards on fewer catches. You know what I'm saying? Not a
Hmm.
lot fewer catches. I still think he's going to be a highly featured part of the offense. I just think that with what he can do in space, and I keep talking about that screen, or the ability to kind of free him up on certain routes, from whether it's bunch or trips. I just think that last year he averaged 13.2 yards per catch. I think he can probably get up into the 14 range, the way he was as a rookie. He averaged 14 yards a catch, and just do a little bit more with his volume.
Let me give you one more before we move on here. To give you an idea of how unbelievable Kellen Moore was last season, he was clearly going to have the best year of his career. This is, and I get it. The passing game was funneled to him because they ran out of pass targets, but this is ridiculous. But it wasn't just late in the season. Even when before the bottom fell out and they lost everybody, pretty much everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Listen to the target totals: 9, 10, 20, 5, 11, 9, 10, 9, 14, 16, 16, 9, and 12. He had 150 targets and he missed 4 games. So he had a chance to hit a 190 to 200. I don't know what the NFL record is. It would have to be close to it. He had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games of at least 8 receptions. He had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games of at least 111 yards. He had a game for 215, 175, 116. And this guy is not explosive. This is what's crazy about it, because people think that Keenan Allen was regressing or he's getting older. I mean, he's 30, he's 31 last season, but it's a shame that I would have loved to see with a full complement of guys available what this thing would have looked like. So as we move forward here, right now he does. But man, and John DiFilippo told us this on Patreon, as Troy Aikman told him, you better have a number 3 receiver. Your offense is only good as your third receiver. So I think Kellen Moore learned that. And Paris Campbell could wind up being that guy. I mean, he could be the glue. Who knows?
Yeah. So the number, going back to the starting two, though, the number that jumps out to me really from that year when Gallup and Cooper both went over 1,000
Yeah.
yards in 2019 is that Cooper averaged about 15 yards a catch that year, and Gallup averaged 17 yards a catch that year, 2019. That's where I think you might see the difference in Devontae Smith's game, where we know AJ Brown's going to have, I forget what he averaged last year, but it usually is up over 14. It could be that. And I can see Devontae going from 12 or 13 to 15, 16, maybe 17 with how they use him. And
So I think
so that means, again, it gives you the opportunity on a per catch basis to maybe even
right.
have fewer catches, but more yards, more touchdowns.
Well, he set his personal high in total receptions and targets. AJ Brown at 106 for 158, but he was down in average per catch. This is because their downfield passing was not as good. He only
Right.
13.7.
They're
Teams were
so
taking it
feast or
away.
famine. Yeah.
Yeah, but they teams are taking away now. And we'll do this right before the season starts. We'll do Eagles props because I know people like to do it for fantasy. We're not going to do it now, but we'll do it like in August when we look at the season. On your point, I could certainly see it because if you look at Dak Prescott's pass attempt total, it's really odd. He threw the same amount of passes in 2019 and
Hmm.
2021. He averaged 37.25 attempts per game. What do you think? How many attempts per game do you think Hurts could have in this offense? Because we know it's going to be heavy pass, but you got to get Barkley the ball. You can't just not run the ball.
Yeah, and then plus, I will have to see whether Jalen Hurts remains a big part of the running game as well.
Tush
So I don't
push.
know. That's a good. It's a good. I tend to think, and I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing. I tend to think that Kellen Moore is going to want to get that passing per passing attempts per game up a little bit. But let's be fair. I know this is going to make Eagles fans mad, but Dak Prescott has become a very good passing quarterback for about 5 to 7 years now, and Jalen Hurts has not reached that level. I mean, Jalen Hurts he doesn't have a 4,000 yard passing year, if I'm not mistaken, right? I
Correct.
mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
And
I
he only
mean,
really
yeah.
good.
I mean, I feel like, and again, people are going to come at us, but Dak Prescott has proven to be a better passer in the
Solid.
NFL and way more consistent than Jalen Hurts has. But that
So
doesn't
he's
mean in
average.
this offense, if it's working and Jalen Hurts is improving, that Kellen won't try to get him to that level.
Well, look, I mean, now see people, okay, on that point about Prescott, the other thing people knock Kellen Moore about is, oh, well, he wouldn't let Dak run. That's not factually correct. First of all, Dak, he had an awful compound fracture of his ankle. And just like Donovan McNabb, the ACL and the broken, he had a bunch of injuries over his career, but there's a point in your career where you don't run as much.
Yeah.
I mean, they would call runs. He wasn't running like Hurts did. Let's also call it like that. Now, by the way, Jalen attempts per game, he's generally over his career been average per game between 28 and 31.
Hmm.
That's why I asked, like, could now, because Kellen wants to throw the football, but it's the delicate balance between getting Barkley the football. You got to count for him. He's making over 12 million. Could Hurts average 32 to 34 attempts per game and still get Barkley the ball? That's the question.
Right. Right.
So
That
we'll
is a
see.
question. All right. And finishing off on Nussmeier, I mean, I think like we hit on this. The two big names are the influences here are Scott Linehan and Chris Peterson. Chris Peterson, the Boise State head coach, he really came into prominence. They beat Oklahoma, right? Was it the Rose Bowl
I'm
or
not sure, but
I forget what bowl,
Peterson
Fiesta
called the
Bowl?
plays. Yeah,
Yeah.
he called the plays before when he was their OC. He was their
Mhm.
OC before he became the head coach. I assume he still did or had a heavy influence on it, and Kellen was a part of that. So, oh, and by the way, another thing that I like, and I've talked to coaches about this, it's important because they knowing that Nussmeier also coached tight ends in his career, it's good to know that because it helps him connect with his fellow coaches because he knows what tight ends, that he's coached it.
Right.
It's good that he knows he coached tight ends 2 years with Dallas, so he knows the positions. It's good to know that. And oh, I'll add this: known in coaching circles for details on footwork and mechanics. Very well respected, Doug Nussmeier is by his peers. So, he also recruited Jalen Hurts to the University of Florida. He obviously didn't go there, Jalen, but he knows Jalen, so they have a relationship. He did work 1 year with Stoutland, Doug Nussmeier at Alabama in 2012.
It's hard not to see the similarities actually between the resumes and pedigrees of Doug Nussmeier and Brian Johnson. Brian Johnson did a good job 2 years ago as the quarterbacks coach. There was obviously different circumstances last year as OC, but both come from the college ranks. They have a lot of, both come from, first of all, spread programs, spread tutelage, because we know Brian Johnson played at Utah under Urban Meyer, a big time spread concept guy, right? And then he went and coached at Florida, just like Doug Nussmeier. Both of them have been offensive coordinator at Florida. So they were at power programs and they dealt with different quarterbacks at the Power Five level. And I think, yeah, you wrote this. Doug Nussmeier has some experience he was at Alabama and he was
Yeah, with
with
Stout.
Jeff
Yeah,
Stoutland there.
this is
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, boy, and we'll get to Stout in a minute. We
Yeah.
uncovered a couple things that are interesting, but I mean, the coaching is going to be good here. I'd be stunned if this doesn't work out in terms of how they're coached now. As we'll move on to Jamal Singleton and the other coaches, I'm just so curious how Moore and Sirianni, who didn't have a previous relationship, they didn't know each other. I'm so fascinated how it's going to work.
Yeah, yes, I agree with you. We addressed that the whole, hey, this could be a match made in heaven, or it could be like 2020 when you had like
Oh,
too many ideological clashes, and it showed on the field. All right, let's take a quick break as we move on to different coaches. We're going to hear a word from our friends at Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
Okay, along with finishing off this coaching staff, we said we were going to talk about our Patreon. We do have a couple of new members to our great Patreon community, Ben, CJ, and Kevin. We'll have your Discord chat that you do once a week coming up on Thursday. In order to be on our Discord channel, it's part of being a Patreon member. And we are going to have a big announcement coming up probably Monday, July 22nd, on our relaunch and explanation of all the tiers, the new tiers we're introducing, the new content we're going to be introducing, that you're gonna salivate over some of the new things many of the new things we're bringing to our Inside the Birds Patreon.
okay. Two things I want to add. So, by the way, if you're on our Discord, we will drop nuggets when after, like, let's say, you and I go to training camp. I'm going to give you 2 or 3 nuggets every time I go to camp. Like, soon as practice is done, I'm going to go into the Discord and go, hey guys, here's a couple nuggets you should know about. You're going to get exclusively there. That's the only place you're going to get it. So there's just stuff you're going to get by being a member. There's value. Obviously, the guys know this with free agency when we put about 40 scoops in there. We were giving like play-by-play of this information we're getting, like, oh guys, this is going to happen. It may take a week or two, but this is going to wind up happening. So there's tremendous value for Discord. We love that. We love going back and forth with everyone with their ideas, and it's pretty good. And the cool thing is the guys are aggregating like the news that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
Actually really cool. Like, and they say, hey, you know anything about this? Go, yeah, we could add this. It's actually really cool. So patreon.com/inside the birds to be a member, which you're going to want to do. Trust us on that.
100%. All right. Let's continue our conversation with this offense. We're going to save Geoff Stoutland for last because there's some interesting concepts we want to get to there. Jamal Singleton returns. The three guys who come back who were retained were the running back coach, Jamal Singleton, the wide receiver coach, Aaron Moorhead, and the tight end coach, Jason Michael. So there is it's not like it's a completely overhauled offensive staff. And these guys will obviously take the message now being delivered by the offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore, and trickle it down. Jamal Singleton, man, this is his 4th year with the Eagles, and he was the most journeyman coach you've ever seen. He's been with so many different college and pro teams, but this is his 4th year with the Eagles. What do we know? Well, you and I have had some opportunities to talk to Jamal, and I find him to be a really insightful guy, very smart, and really focused on little things that I had never thought of before when we spoken to him.
On that, so I talked to a coach who's worked with him before with the Raiders, because before here, in fact, he was good. I think he had accepted a coaching job with University of Kentucky. I think that's when the Eagles hired him away from there. I think that was in 2020. I think that's kind of what was happening. Then Nick got the job and they hired him here. So most coaches will, unless the money's significantly different, they're going to come here to the NFL. So Jamal was with the Bengals, with the Raiders, with the Colts. This is the 4th year with the team. The coach that I spoke with said he's known for his attention to detail, sort of what you just said, but I'll take it a little further. Creative coaching methods was the term. He goes, he's very creative. And also, this is a little nugget. Didn't know this, but he coached Chad Hall, who's known as one of the better receivers coaches at the NFL, is now with Jacksonville.
Yeah.
They were both together at Air Force.
Air Force, yep.
Yeah. So I think that's pretty cool. And everyone I've talked to who's worked with Jamal speaks very highly of him. And The Eagles are kind of lucky. They've had some really good running backs coaches. Stu Staley, Jamal Singleton. Was it what was the guy under Andy? Ted, what's his name?
The
Ted Williams.
guy, Dasher?
No, Ted Williams. No, the running
Oh,
backs.
Ted Williams, the running
Yeah.
backs. Yeah, yeah. I'm
really
sorry.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they've had some really good running backs coaches over the years.
They have, and I remember we were talking to him. I forget where, Combine, Senior Bowl, somewhere, and we got a little insight into how he sees the small nuance part of the game. I think we were talking about pass protection at one point, and he was saying, like everybody wants to talk about how a running back pass protects against a blitz or an extra pressure, a sim pressure, but remember, in the days of RPO and the fake handoff, you have to, as a running back, sort of be able to adjust from pretending to take the handoff to all of a sudden a blocking position. And it's getting harder these days for younger kids to be able to do that, to become good pass protection, because it's not like in maybe the late 90s or mid 2000s where, all right, you're to the side of the quarterback, and as soon as the ball snapped, you're already in your pass protection stance, because the RPO has changed that. And the play action has changed that. So you can see him, the way he was able to describe the subtle nuances of the position were really good. And I imagine that helped him impress himself upon the new coordinator to be able to stay.
And by the way, he worked with Joe Mixon with the Bengals. So he's worked with he was with Zach Taylor early in Zach's career, and he's been with John Gruden earlier in his career as well. And he coached a bunch of spots: Oklahoma State, Arkansas, Air Force, as I said earlier. So he's been around a long time, and he's a well-traveled coach, as you said, and it's pretty good. I mean, we've talked to coaches that work with him, so it's a pretty good coach. This is a good hire by the Eagles. I don't know what the connection was, but give him credit. This is a pretty good hire.
Yeah, he's also with Saquon Barkley here. This will be obviously the most talented running back that he's got, and they want to get Barkley more involved in the passing game. Will Shipley is someone that the Eagles brought in because they felt that he could catch the ball even more so than he was used at Clemson in catching the ball. And, we were told that they want to see Will be able to run some routes and get the ball in his hands in the passing game. So obviously Jamal will be working with those guys on that. He's got some, some of the bigger guys like Lou Nichols and Ty Davis Price to work with. So he's got a nice little assortment of running backs. But I also remember him once talking to me about, why certain running backs are good at catching the ball versus not good at catching the ball. And he said, sometimes it's not the running back. Sometimes it's the person throwing to the running back. For example, if you go from a 6'4" quarterback who can see over the lineman and has a more overhead delivery compared to a shorter running back who may not see it and have a sidearm delivery, it's harder. The ball comes in at a different trajectory based on how the quarterback tends to throw the ball, and that could impact on how a running back can catch the ball running routes. So all that stuff is like, okay, wow, you never really think about that, right? The size of the quarterback, the trajectory of the throw. So just a really intelligent guy.
Yeah, and also understand, like, when you have a quarterback who's shorter, like they can't, like whether it's Kyler Murray or Russell Wilson. Hurts is 6'1", which is not small, but you'd rather a guy be at least 6'2". When a quarterback's got to account for the size of the lineman and he's got to move and throw it differently, that does affect how you run your routes, because you have to come back or the ball might come out differently. So that's something to keep an eye on. It's something that we don't talk a lot about, but it's true.
All right, moving on to Aaron Moorhead. He is the ultimate survivor. After years and years and years of the Eagles having a different wide receivers coach year after year, Aaron Moorhead returns also for he is in his 5th year, right? Yep. He's one of the few holdovers from the Doug Peterson staff. He's a guy who had mostly college experience. He did obviously play in the NFL. I remember he played with the Colts. Did he play with anybody else that I don't remember?
Just the Colts. He got a ring. He got a ring. He won a Super Bowl ring with the Colts. He's interesting guy. He actually worked mostly in college. I talked to a coach who worked with him in Vanderbilt.
Mm-hmm.
He said he's really smart, detailed, but I know people knock him because they say, well, who's he developed? Well, it's going to sound kind of funny because the guy wound up being, there's a whole, Travis Fulgham's history with Eagles is kind of really interesting. He was a flash in the pan, very talented guy, but had football character issues, which we detailed, not exclusively, but we had a lot of interesting stuff. We were getting a lot of feedback on him in 2020. So he fizzled. Jalen Reagor never made it. You could pin it on him. Obviously, Eagles reached on that pick. Jalen's doing better with the Patriots. Quez Watkins, we could debate. He did develop a little bit. 6th-round pick.
Yeah, I mean, I think if a 6th-round pick is still in the league 5 years into his contract, that's a win. You know,
yeah, but see, I always go by what did he do when the player was there with you. He did show some quasi development. We know about we detailed back in 2020 the immaturity of him and all that. But he was the one guy. Isn't it crazy? He was the one guy of John Hightower, Reagor, Fulgham. Who else was on? I know Greg Ward, who's been on and off
Greg
the
Ward, Quez Watkins. Who is the guy? Oh man, I always why can't I think of his name? He caught like a touchdown. Perkins,
JJ,
Josh Perkins.
too.
Josh Perkins,
who was a tight end.
Oh, but he was like a wide receiver tight end.
Right.
Yeah.
JJ, Arcega-Whiteside. See, here's the thing. Do you want to put it on Aaron Moorhead or just say the Eagles completely missed on it? I would say the latter. They missed on it. The guy never did. Not only did he develop, that was a major reach. Right. You and I, we've told this story before. We were at the combine together in 2020, and we're having some drinks, and this personnel director said he gave him a priority free agent grade. We almost fell over.
Yeah, 2nd-round pick, priority free agent. That's you don't get too far off as far as polar opposites there on a grade.
But we also talked to other teams who said they had a 3rd-round grade on him. So look, I get the guy's stuff was awful here. Arcega-Whiteside, okay, didn't work. So are you going to put? Because people love to point fingers. The bottom line is they haven't had a lot of receivers here. Alshon Jeffrey was here, by the way. He was already developed. It's hard to say. Devontae Smith already came in as a very good player. Now he's elite. Now it's hard to know. Did Aaron Moorhead help him get elite? It's subjective. We don't know that.
Right.
There's some things that we definitely know. A.J. Brown was already stud. He's taken his career to another level. So it's people criticize Aaron Moorhead, and you talked about he's a survivor, but you can't put it all on him. Eagles have missed on a bunch of receivers since he's been here. Period. End of story.
Yeah, I feel like at this stage of the game, what we can say about Aaron Moorhead is that I don't know that he's hurt the Eagles. I don't know that he's helped them. I think he has just been a wide receivers coach, and nothing really jumps out as far as really good or really bad.
But I'd say this though on that. I'd like to find one guy, okay, and maybe we're missing someone. If folks tell us in the comments on YouTube if we're missing somebody. On your point's a great point. Could we find one player that Watkins? Okay, I know I'm reaching here, but he did develop a little bit. But is there a guy who got a 2nd contract and they develop? Again, they haven't had a lot of receivers here for him. Yeah. Some guy there were veterans already established. So but you make a good point though. It's kind of like in the middle. You can criticize the guy, but I think it's kind of like the guys at 2020. It was just not a good group. It was a bad room, very immature. And isn't it ironic that the next year they got Devontae Smith, who went to Alabama, was an absolute stud player. They get A.J. Brown is about as disciplined as a leader as it gets.
Right.
They completely transformed the room. So I think it's more on the front office, more than the receivers coach, to be honest with you.
Sure. I mean, listen, and we'll move on in a second, but if we had seen Jalen Reagor or Travis Fulgham or John Hightower move on to a different team after their stint with the Eagles and do better, then I think you could say, hey, there may be an issue here with the wide receivers.
What happened here? Right.
You have not. You have not seen that.
Sure.
And then we'll see with Quez Watkins. I mean, I have a feeling Quez Watkins is what he is. What you saw in Philadelphia, you'll probably see in Pittsburgh, nothing more, nothing less. And that sort of leads us back to the guy hasn't, I don't know that he's helped the Eagles. I don't know that he's hurt the Eagles. He's just out there coaching wide receivers. And then obviously the last guy, tight end, Jason Michael, I think we can say, hey, since he's been here, I mean, you've seen a guy like Jack Stoll, who's now with the Giants, but come in as an undrafted free agent and develop into a guy who could step in, give you some blocking, give you some receiving. He didn't have to be great, but he defied the odds. He is an undrafted free agent who did earn a 2nd contract. Well, did he a 3rd? Is this one of the Giants' 3rd or a 2nd?
I'm sorry, on Jack
Did he get
Stoll?
a 1-year extension with the Eagles for 1 year? No, he just played 3 years.
No, he just played it out. The Eagles, we were told, offered him an opportunity to come back, but he chose the Giants. He thought he'd get a better role. But a couple things on Jason Michael. He actually has called plays before, did it 2 years with the Titans in 2014 and 2015. He's also coached quarterbacks, which I like. Again, because you get to see other positions and how they develop and how their coaches get a feel for them. And we did talk to one of his former players that he's had over his years in the NFL, said that the accountability that he has, he's very respectful of his players, coaches hard, but they love him because he's a good dude. But he said this player told us that he never had a coach who coached to this like amount of detail, and this coach, this player said that Jason Michael was the one coach that he worked with in his career that actually helped him improve. Because not all players improve, quite frankly, with coaching. This guy felt he did.
100%. All right, let's finish off with two really important coaches and some concepts about them that we're going to have to look at how these things go forward and what develops. Before we do that, we're going to pause and hear a word from our great friends at Sky Motor Cars.
Sky Motor Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people all over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schiller, make sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225.
And if you happen to stop into Sky Motor Cars out there in Westchester, PA, make sure you tell them Adam and Geoff sent you. You will get a great deal. If not, always visit them at SkyMotorCars.com. So let's talk about Geoff Stoutland, who is now in his, I can't believe it's been 13 seasons that he's been with
13.
the Eagles. I mean, I still remember when he was hired.
Yeah.
Great coach, gregarious guy, well respected. You can call him the top offensive line coach in the league, or at least one of them. There are some
12th. I'm sorry, it's his 12th year. I'm sorry, I can't count.
12th year. Right. Greg Cosell said something in our Eagles preview that last week that dropped that was really interesting. And we had heard this as well. And Greg obviously heard it from different people, and it's really worth discussing. And that's Geoff Stoutland has never been a really big fan of a lot of motion in the offense. Now, why that's important, because people say, well, he's just the offensive line coach. What does he care? Well, he's also the run game coordinator. And a lot of coaches, Shanahan especially, and Kellen Moore, use motion not just for pass, but also in the run game. Geoff Stoutland, as far as we know, not a huge fan of motion. So
not at all, to be honest.
Not at all.
We've been told, yeah.
Yeah, but here comes Kellen Moore. That's a big part of the offense. Something's got to give there.
Well, there's going to be motion. I could bet the house on that. Now, how much motion, that remains to be seen, because Kellen's got to be able to run the offense like he wants to. Stout's is going to have to handle it. We'll see how that works out. Stout's had that run game coordinator title since 18. He really does design the run game. He's really good at it. This is really interesting. So when Stout was hired away from Alabama, he never coached in the NFL before. He coached nearly 30 years on the collegiate level, mostly coaching offensive linemen, coached some tight ends. He also started his coaching career as an inside linebacker coach. So at least he's coached some defense. But Stout's beloved. Everybody knows this. But when he came here, I can remember in 2013, Chip's first year, there was some criticism from coaches I know around, like, why is he hiring a college coach? I mean, he's from Alabama. It's a great program, run a lot of pro stuff. But this guy's a college coach. There was some like, okay, we'll see. Well, the guy's going to be the Eagles Hall of Fame. I mean, this guy's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And let me give you some. And he did work at University of Miami and Michigan State. He worked with. We mentioned Nussmeier in 2012. He also I think there's another Eagles coach he's worked with before. It might have been at Michigan State. I don't have.
So when he was at Michigan State, I think John L. Smith was the head coach at the time.
Right. No, but I think he also worked with another Eagles assistant coach over the years at Michigan State. I don't remember who it was.
Okay.
I'll look it up. But here are the success stories. I forgot about this one. Evan Mathis, Pro Football Focus's hero. This one, because Evan used to joke, I knew Evan pretty well, and because he used to call himself a journeyman, because Evan was like Dolphins, Panthers, Bengals. When he signed a veteran free agent deal and for very little guarantee money or nothing, when he signed here, no one thought anything of it. Just going to be a backup. He was a 2-time Pro Bowler under Stout in 2013, 2014, out of nowhere.
Yeah,
incredible.
And don't forget Alan Barber, being kind of this journeyman to a pretty legit starter for them for a couple of years as well.
That's right. I forgot to mention that. How many was it? 3 years he started? At least two.
2 or 3. Yeah.
So some of the success stories. Now we have to remember Jason Kelce, right? He's going to be a Hall of Famer. We know it. We love him. Kelsey's career after 15. We know this is 20 between the last year of Chip when Howie came back. There were serious questions whether Howie's going to trade Kelsey. And Jason's talked about this publicly. It's not a secret. And let's not forget, like he revived his career. And I give Jason all the credit in the world. Obviously, he's the player. He played it. But Stout brought him to another level. It's really rare to take when your career's floundering. Because remember, he also had an ACL injury, which he had against Baltimore. People forget about that.
Yep.
But to move this along, Kelsey revived his career and took it to another level, which few people thought he could do, becoming the best player at his position for a series of years. Got to give Stout credit. Brandon Brooks, that Texas didn't want. Brooks became a stud here. Lane, obviously. Lane Johnson, who was drafted to be Jason Peters' eventual replacement.
Yep.
Lane's going to be a Hall of Famer. Big V, who got $10 million a year on it. He got thrown in there, didn't look good in the beginning. Then the Eagles probably would not win a Super Bowl without him. He was really good, surprisingly.
Yep.
Went up playing guard for the Lions. Isaac Seumalo, who's talking to Steelers, he was their best lineman last season. And Steph Wisniewski, if people thought his career was over, he had to replace Brandon Brooks, correct?
Yes. Yes, he replaced Brandon Brooks. Yep.
Right? Mailata, maybe his best story. Jordan Mailata.
I mean, it's hard not to be, but yeah.
Right? Landon Dickerson, obviously. And Suapeta, the reason why I brought him up is because, folks, an undrafted free agent to wind up starting some games for your team, that's a good success story.
And not only that, but he got him to shed the whole, I can only play right guard, right? I can be on multiple sides. Yeah. Right. So he developed. I mean, everything we said we were kind of looking for in Aaron Moorhead as far as where is your fingerprint, you can see it there with Jeff Stoutland from the beginning to now. Yes. And look, whether it's Tyler Steen or Mekhi Becton at right guard this year, one of those two, if it works out, we're going to say that's another Jeff Stoutland. More so if it's Becton. If it's Tyler Steen, you say, well, you drafted a guy in the third round. He should have been an adequate player. But if Becton can become a right guard on merit,
massive,
that would be
offensive line.
Yeah. Oh my God. I can't even. And you're asking, like, should they should never even throw the ball. Forget Kellen Moore have to, like, rip up the whole game. We're just going to run the ball.
I got
every single play, run the ball.
Right. The Eagles could, if Becton wins the right guard job, have the tallest offensive line in NFL history. Mailata 6'8". Lane is how tall? 6'6".
He's like 6'6", right?
6'6", 6'7". We'll get his. Dickerson is just under 6'6", I think.
Yep, I think he's about 6'6". Yeah.
Becton is I think over. Yeah, he's 6'7" and a quarter. That's just insane. If he wins, oh my God. Will Hurts be able to see over the line?
Cam Jurgens in the huddle is going to be like,
6'2" and 3/4.
I'm 6'2". I feel like the shortest guy in the world here.
That's crazy. And Tyler Steen's what, 6'5"? Yeah, he's over 6'5". Holy Stromboli. Wow, this is pretty interesting. So the only miss he's had, right? I mean, obviously the front office gets credit for the misses as well. As Andre Dillard never worked out. Worked out.
Well, and then he never was able to get Chance Warmack. Yeah, that was his first real project because they had coached him at Alabama, but he was, there's a lot of things that go into that. Maybe Chance was just not motivated. I don't know.
I mean, the Eagles didn't draft. It wasn't like the Eagles drafted Chance Warmack. They took a chance on him when
people forget they actually went to him first after they benched Seumalo before they went to Steph Wisniewski.
Yeah.
So there was a little bit of a Chance Warmack in there. And
is that right?
That chance got taken away really quick.
I didn't know that they went to Warmack before.
They went to Warmack for like either a half or a game before they pulled the
Did not know that. Did not know that. And also we should add TJ Pagnetti, who Chip Kelly brought in with him from Oregon. He was their assistant tight ends coach. He's now Stoutland's assistant. Roy Istvan is now with Cleveland, who was Jeff's longtime assistant. Jeff's known him for decades, and Jeff brought him in. Now, for some reason, nobody seems to know why. We've asked around, and nobody knows why Roy left because he still has the same title with Cleveland. It's kind of weird.
Right. Maybe more opportunity. Who knows? Because Jeff Stoutland's always going to be there, but who knows? And Pagnetti, wasn't he the assistant running backs coach at one point? So
he was that too. Yes, years ago. Yeah. No, tight ends. No, but you're right. I think he did
done both.
Yes, he's done. He definitely. Yeah, he's and his brother Ryan is the analytics director for the Jaguars.
That's right. Used to be Doug Peterson's right-hand man up in the booth when they won the Super Bowl for the Eagles in 2017.
Right.
All right. So the last guy we're going to talk about, and I mean, this is sort of fascinating because he's the associate head coach and he is the pass game coordinator. But if we're being very fair and honest and objective, you have to wonder if either of those two titles that he has, if he's able to fulfill them, because you have a new offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach, and that's Kevin Patullo, who has been Nick Sirianni's right-hand man, has been a big part of the passing offense, and like Nick Sirianni, comes up through the traditional West Coast pedigree. And, you know, the title alone, and we've explained a million times, titles don't mean anything other than what a team will pay you, right? Titles amount to a better paycheck. So even though he is the associate head coach and pass game coordinator, I think it remains to be seen where Kevin Patullo's fit will be within this new offensive structure.
Okay, so yeah, and by the way, he was, as we outlined 3 years ago, what we had heard was he was heavily involved in game planning. He was super involved in it. Now, Patullo has in his coaching experience with quarterbacks and receivers. They don't have an assistant receivers coach, so he could pitch in there. Obviously, Sirianni can if he needs to, because that's his position. It's a great question. I'm not sure. We've looked into this. We're not totally sure, because I watched Patullo work in OTAs. He was going station to station. I'm not sure how they're going to do this. It's a very good question. We're going to look into this. Because it's Kellen's scheme. He doesn't know Kellen, or at least he hasn't worked with him before. He doesn't work with Nussmeier, so I don't know how this is going to work. This is a very good question.
Right, and it's sort of, it feels like the way Nussmeier and Kellen Moore are tied together, you would say that about Nick Sirianni and Kevin Patullo, and that creates that, to me, thinking back to the 2020 when you had Doug and Marty, and then you had the Scangarello Briner, you had like the faction.
Oh, Andrew Briner, wow.
Yeah, it was not good. I mean, we all remember 2020.
It's like eight guys, there's like 6 guys in Jalen's ear.
Right.
And obviously Wentz. Yeah, it's not good in 2020.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So even if it's harmonious and Kellen Moore and Doug Nussmeier are running the show, you wonder, how does Kevin Patullo find his value and his worth on this staff?
So I'll give you an example. So DiFilippo, when John was the Eagles quarterbacks coach, John ran the meetings. He ran the show. He was the one in Wentz's ear. They let John Peterson, to his credit, let John handle Carson, handle Nate Sudfeld, and whoever else was there. Obviously Nick Foles. But that's one thing. Now where Frank Reich was more of the big brother, big picture, but he didn't really interfere. Whereas you said in 2020, you got Andrew Briner, Doug Peterson, Press Taylor.
Oh yeah, Press too. Yep.
Press Taylor. The list goes. You can't. It's ridiculous. Too many. You can't have that. So something we'll look in. We're not accusing anyone of anything this year. We don't know.
Right.
But that's something to keep an eye on. You don't want too many years of too many people in Jalen's ear. That's just not right. You don't need that for your quarterback. So that's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, 100%. That was what I was trying to get to. Not necessarily just what the coaching room is like, but how does that impact a quarterback who's trying to rebound from an unideal finish to last year, when he's got all these different coaches who come from different ideological philosophies here and backgrounds, all trying to meld together. That is something that I hope that in November, we're not sitting here being like, here's what we're hearing. There's a clash here, clash there. The quarterback doesn't know, which way to look. And that would be a bad situation for the Eagles.
Honestly, you saw when it gets haywire with Matt Patricia coming in, he does what he whatever changes he made, players weren't buying it. They just weren't, it's too much freelancing going on.
Yeah.
That's what happens when things are haywire. And we're not trying to be negative here. We're just giving you an idea, because and you could add Rich Scangarello to that group. There might have been 6 people involved with the quarterback.
Yeah. No, it's not. I mean,
that.
If we don't bring this up, we're ignoring that this has happened twice in the last 4 years of Eagles, right? Last year with Patricia on defense, with Patricia and Desai, and then 2020 with that whole room that we just mentioned. So I'm actually a little surprised, I guess, that the Eagles are going to go forward and allow this kind of function on their offensive staff again to be a little bit murky with the different ideologies there. But again, we're not there. We don't know. It could be kumbaya right now. Who knows? But it's just something to watch for as this season goes on. And that's basically the offensive coaching staff. We just went through it all, their influences, their philosophies, and what expectations we have out of individual Eagles and the offense as a whole. As we mentioned, if everything's right, this should be no worse than a top 5 offense, and most likely a top 3 offense if everybody's skills are maximized, because there's not too many teams that have more offensive firepower than the Philadelphia Eagles. That's going to do it for this episode of Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in Eagles intel. And as always, we thank you for flying with us inside the Birds. Be sure to check out our friends at PHLSportsNation.com. They're enhancing the fans' experience with their coverage of all Philadelphia sports teams. For the fan, by the fan is their motto. So make sure you check them out at PHLSportsNation.com and on Twitter at PHLSportsNation.